The smell of freshly ground coffee filled the air, mingling with the crisp morning breeze as customers lined up outside Caffeine Haven. Claire Monroe stood behind the counter, flashing her brightest smile as she handed out cups with custom latte art, an extra touch her rival across the street never seemed to bother with. "Have a great day," she chirped as another customer took a sip and sighed in satisfaction. Across the street, through the large glass windows of Bean Battle, Jackson Reynolds stood at his espresso machine, watching with narrowed eyes. His competitor's line was longer than his this morning. Again, he turned to his barista. "Offered double loyalty points today. Free espresso shots for first-time customers. And for the love of coffee, make sure our beans are fresh from the roaster, not just ground on site." The barista hesitated. "That's the lot, boss." Jackson's jaw tightened. "It's necessary." This war had been raging for over a year. Ever since Claire had swooped in and opened her sleek, cozy cafe directly across from his Caffeine Haven had been a thorn in his side. His customers defected. Her social media presence was annoyingly engaging. And worst of all, she was good. Damn good. Claire was relentless with her promotions, creative with her drinks, and, though he hated to admit it, charming with customers. While Bean Battle focused on strong, traditional brews, Claire wasn't afraid to experiment with new flavors, themed drinks, and special discounts that kept people hooked. Their rivalry wasn't just about business, it was personal. Jackson had worked too hard to build Bean Battle from the ground up. He wasn't about to let some coffee queen waltz in and take over his street. But Claire? She saw it differently. To her, Bean Battle was stuck in the past. Stubborn, unyielding, and ruled by a man who thought competition was a dirty word. She thrived off pushing his buttons, watching his barely restrained fury whenever her lines outpaced his. She lived for his scowls. He lived to prove her wrong. Every morning was a battle. Every seasonal promotion was a declaration of war. Every customer who switched sides felt like a victory or a betrayal. But neither of them expected a single night to change everything. That evening, as both shops were preparing to close, the first flicker of warning came. A blackout. The entire street plunged into darkness, leaving them both stranded with nowhere to go, except the nearest unlocked door. And as fate would have it, that door happened to belong to the building right between their shops. With rain hammering down outside and only each other for company, their rivalry was about to take a very unexpected turn. The moment the lights flickered, Claire barely had time to register the warning before her cafe was swallowed in darkness. A collective groan rose from her customers. "Ugh, not again. How long do you think it'll last?" Claire grabbed her phone, the screen casting a soft glow in the dim space. "Probably just a temporary outage. Everyone hold tight." Across the street, she caught movement. Bean Battle's sign sputtered before giving out completely. Through the window, Jackson Reynolds stood near his counter, phone in hand, jaw clenched. Even in the dark, she could feel the weight of his glare. The rivalry didn't stop just because the power did. The rain started minutes later. A torrential downpour, sudden and unrelenting. The streets emptied quickly as people rushed for shelter, leaving both coffee shops eerily quiet. Claire locked her doors and sighed, glancing at the sky. "Guess I'm stuck here for a while." But fate had other plans. A loud crack of thunder shook the ground. A second later, water began seeping through the front of her cafe. "You've got to be kidding me," she muttered, rushing to grab towels and block the entrance. Then, as if the universe wanted to test her patience further, a loud knock echoed against the glass. Jackson. His shirt was soaked, hair dripping, eyes flashing with equal parts frustration and something she couldn't quite place. "Don't even say it," he gritted out, his voice muffled by the glass. "I need to get inside." She folded her arms. "Why would I let my competition take refuge here?" Lightning cracked again, and she could see the way his jaw tightened. "Because my place is flooding too, and unless you want to see me float past your window on a damn coffee bag, I suggest we call a truce." Claire hesitated. Letting Jackson inside went against every petty bone in her body. But standing in this storm like a stubborn fool didn't make her any better. With a sigh, she unlocked the door.
"Fine.
But don't touch anything. Jackson stepped inside, the scent of rain and espresso clinging to him as he shook out his jacket. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and Claire felt something shift. Something dangerous. It had always been there, she realized, the tension, the fire. It wasn't just hatred. It was something else, something neither of them dared acknowledge. Until now. The power outage stretched longer than either of them expected. Minutes turned into an hour. The rain didn't let up. The street was a ghost town. Claire sat on the counter, arms crossed as she watched Jackson pace. "You're making me anxious," she muttered. He shot her a glare. "And you breathing in my direction is annoying, but I'm dealing with it." "Wow. You sure know how to thank someone for saving your ass." He exhaled sharply and stopped pacing. "I'll admit it. Letting me in was decent of you. But that doesn't mean I suddenly like you." She smirked. "Trust me, Reynolds, I'm not losing sleep over that." The room fell into silence, broken only by the steady rhythm of rain against the windows. It was strange, being here with him, without their usual battlefield of coffee promotions and competitive antics between them. Without customers watching. Without distractions. Just them. Jackson leaned against the counter, arms crossed, his dark eyes unreadable. "So, tell me something," he said. Claire arched a brow. "Depends on what you're asking." He hesitated, then finally spoke. "Why did you open your cafe here?" She blinked. "Seriously? That's what you want to ask?" He nodded. "You could have picked anywhere. Any street, any city. But you chose right across from me. Why?" Claire tilted her head, considering. "I grew up around here. The spot was perfect, the rent wasn't outrageous, and, I won't lie, I liked the challenge." She smiled, a slow, teasing curve of her lips. "You seem too comfortable with being the only good coffee shop around. I wanted to shake things up." Jackson scoffed. "Well, congratulations. You did." She laughed, and for the first time, it wasn't laced with rivalry. Something about the way he was looking at her now, like he was seeing her beyond just the enemy, made the space between them feel smaller. And when lightning flashed again, illuminating his sharp jawline, his soaked shirt clinging to his toned frame, Claire swallowed hard. Damn it. She was not about to acknowledge the very dangerous attraction bubbling beneath the surface. Except, Jackson stepped closer. Not enough to touch, but enough to steal the air between them. The tension shifted, thickened. Neither of them spoke, but the silence wasn't empty. It was full of something else. Something warm. Something electric. "Maybe this truce isn't so bad," Claire murmured. Jackson's eyes darkened. "Maybe not." And for the first time in their long, heated rivalry, neither of them felt the urge to fight. At least, not in the way they usually did. The storm raged on outside, the power outage stretching into the night. Claire drummed her fingers on the counter, watching the flickering candle between them. The small flame cast long shadows across Jackson's face, softening the usual sharpness of his expression. It was unnerving, seeing him without the weight of competition pressing between them. Jackson leaned back in his chair, stretching his arms behind his head. "Looks like we're stuck here for the night." "Unbelievable," Claire muttered. "You could have kicked me out," he pointed out. She rolled her eyes. "Please. I'm not that cruel." "Debatable." She shot him a glare, but there was no real heat behind it. The silence settled again, thick yet oddly comfortable. It was strange. Normally, their interactions were filled with snide remarks and unspoken challenges. But here, in the dim candlelight, with no customers to impress or battles to win, they had nothing left to hide behind. Claire sighed, rubbing her arms. "So, do we just sit here all night?" Jackson glanced toward the back. "Got a couch in that office of yours?" "Yes, but it's mine," she said instantly. "Figured," he muttered, smirking. Another beat of silence. Then Claire's stomach growled. Loudly. Jackson raised a brow, amused. She groaned. "I didn't have dinner, okay?" His lips twitched. "I have an emergency snack stash in my shop. Too bad it's across the street in the pouring rain." He hummed, leaning forward slightly. "Unless you want to make a run for it." Claire gave him a flat look. I'd rather starve. Jackson chuckled, shaking his head. Then, without a word, he stood and walked toward the back of her shop. Hey, where are you going? She called. A moment later, he returned, tossing something onto the counter. A protein bar. She stared at it. Where did you? Your supply shelf, he said simply, sitting back down. You went through my stuff? You're welcome. Claire narrowed her eyes, but grabbed the bar anyway. She peeled it open, taking a bite, and let out a soft sigh. It wasn't exactly a gourmet meal, but it was something. Jackson watched her, an unreadable look in his eyes. You always this bad at taking care of yourself? She frowned. What's that supposed to mean? Means you're always running around doing 10 things at once, but you forget the basics, he said casually. Like eating. She paused mid-bite, caught off guard. She didn't know how to respond. Jackson wasn't wrong. She was always juggling a million things. Running a cafe, keeping up with promotions, making sure everything was perfect. She barely had time to sit, let alone worry about herself. But hearing him say it unsettled her. Don't act like you're any different, she muttered, looking away. Jackson smirked. Fair point. The conversation fizzled out, but something had changed. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but it was there, a shift in the air, a thread of awareness neither of them wanted to pull on too hard. Claire finished eating in silence. Jackson stretched again, his shirt clinging slightly to his frame, damp from earlier. She caught herself looking for a second too long before jerking her gaze away. Get it together, Claire. She needed to sleep. She grabbed a blanket from the storage room and curled up on the couch, pretending Jackson wasn't there. He settled into a chair across from her, arms crossed, watching the storm. Neither of them spoke again. But even as Claire drifted off, she couldn't ignore the way her heartbeat picked up. How? For the first time in their rivalry, the heat between them wasn't just from competition. And that was dangerous. The morning came slow, gray light filtering through the windows. The power still wasn't back, but the rain had finally settled to a soft drizzle. Claire blinked awake, groggy and disoriented, only to find Jackson already up, leaning against the counter, sipping a cold brew from her fridge. She sat up, frowning. You raided my fridge? He smirked. Consider it payment for letting me stay. She groaned, stretching. Sleeping on a couch was not the most comfortable experience. She stood, rubbing her neck, and was about to grab a drink for herself when Jackson suddenly reached out. She stilled. His fingers brushed her skin, right at the nape of her neck, gentle but deliberate. Hold still, he muttered. Claire froze as he lightly pressed his fingers over a knot in her muscles. A sharp but oddly pleasant pressure followed. You slept weird, he said, like it was the most normal thing in the world. Claire opened her mouth, to argue, to tell him off, to say something, but nothing came out. Because damn it, it felt good. The tension in her neck eased under his touch, and for a brief moment, she let herself relax. Then, as if realizing what he was doing, Jackson pulled back. The space between them felt smaller now. Too small. Claire cleared her throat, stepping away. Don't get comfortable, Reynolds. His lips curled into a slow, knowing smirk. Too late. She grabbed a drink from the fridge and downed it like it would erase the last 60 seconds. This was bad. Last night had felt different. And now this? She couldn't let this happen. Truce is over, she announced, forcing her voice to sound steady. As soon as the power comes back, we go back to normal. Jackson didn't look convinced. Sure, Monroe, he said, lazy and amused. Whatever you say. And somehow, Claire had the sinking feeling that nothing was going back to normal. Not after this. The cafe was eerily quiet. The storm had passed, but the power was still out, leaving everything bathed in soft, overcast morning light. Claire moved around her shop, checking supplies and making sure nothing had gone bad overnight. She could feel Jackson's presence lingering behind her, but she refused to acknowledge it. Last night was a fluke. Whatever weird, tension-filled moment they had shared, it meant nothing. Jackson, of course, seemed completely unaffected. Got any coffee that doesn't require electricity? He asked, casually leaning against the counter. Claire shot him a glare. You want me to serve you coffee? He smirked. Well, technically, I am a paying customer today. She scoffed. You didn't pay for that cold brew you stole. Details. She rolled her eyes but reached for the French press anyway. If she was going to be stuck with him for a little longer, she might as well make the best of it. As she poured hot water from a kettle over the coffee grounds, she could feel Jackson watching her. You always do everything yourself? He asked. She hesitated. What do you mean? He gestured around. You run the cafe, handle the promotions, make the drinks, fix things when they break. Do you even have a staff? Claire exhaled. I have a couple of part-timers, but I like being hands-on. This place is mine. Jackson hummed. Same. She glanced at him. You do have employees, though, and a business partner. Sure. But it's still my name on the lease. My reputation on the line. He shrugged. I get why you work yourself to the bone. It's personal. Claire wasn't sure why, but hearing him say that sent a strange warmth through her chest. Before she could dwell on it, a sudden buzz broke the silence. The lights flickered back on. Claire blinked. Jackson straightened. They both stared at the glowing overhead lights for a long second. And just like that, reality crashed back down. The truce was over. Jackson stretched, stepping away from the counter. Well, looks like I can finally go home. Claire nodded, pushing down the ridiculous pang of something in her chest. Regret? No. That wasn't possible. Yeah, she said, forcing a smirk. Back to business as usual. Jackson grabbed his jacket, pausing just before the door. He glanced at her, something unreadable flickering behind his dark eyes. See you around, Monroe. And then he was gone. Claire exhaled sharply, gripping the edge of the counter. What the hell had just happened? By the time Claire opened her cafe for the day, she had convinced herself that nothing had changed. She was still the owner of Mocha Bliss. Jackson was still the infuriating owner of Bean Battle. They were still rivals, still competing for the best sales, the best customers, the best cafe on the street. But the second she stepped outside to set up the sidewalk sign, she caught sight of him across the street. And her stomach did a weird little flip. Nope. Absolutely not. She scowled and turned away, determined to bury every ridiculous, lingering thought from last night. Except Jackson wasn't making it easy. That afternoon, one of her regulars, Melissa, slid into a chair at the counter, phone in hand, eyes sparkling with gossip. So, Melissa drawled, grinning. You and Jackson, huh? Claire nearly dropped the espresso she was pouring. What? Melissa giggled. Oh, come on. The storm? The blackout? You two being stuck together all night? People are talking. Claire set the cup down with a little too much force. There's nothing to talk about. Melissa raised a brow. Really? Because it kind of looked like there was something to talk about. Claire's heart pounded. Who the hell is spreading these rumors? Melissa shrugged. I don't know. It started this morning. People saw you guys leaving the cafe at the same time. Claire clenched her jaw. She knew it had been a bad idea letting Jackson in. Listen, she said, forcing a casual tone. Jackson and I are not a thing. We were trapped together. That's all. Uh-huh. Melissa didn't look convinced. And worse? Neither did Claire. For the next few days, Claire did her best to ignore the whispers. She focused on her work, threw herself into perfecting new recipes, and refused to acknowledge the fact that she was hyper-aware of Jackson every time he was nearby. Unfortunately, Jackson didn't seem to be avoiding her. If anything, he was making things worse. Like today, when she ran out of vanilla syrup during the lunch rush and had no choice but to send her part-timer to the nearest supply store. As she stepped outside for some fresh air, she found Jackson leaning casually against the front of his shop, stirring his coffee with a knowing smirk. Running low on supplies, Monroe? She scowled. Not that it's any of your business. He took a slow sip, watching her. You know, I have an extra bottle of vanilla syrup. I could lend it to you. Claire folded her arms. And what would that cost me? Jackson's smirk deepened. Oh, nothing much. Just public acknowledgement that my cafe is superior. She scoffed. I'd rather shut down my shop forever. He chuckled, but his gaze lingered a little too long. It made her insides twist in a way that had nothing to do with annoyance. "Suit yourself," he said, turning back toward his cafe. "But if you ever do need something, you know where to find me." Claire watched him walk away, jaw clenched. This was getting dangerous. She could handle competition. She could even handle rumors. But what she couldn't handle was the slow, creeping realization that maybe, just maybe, she didn't hate Jackson Reynolds as much as she thought she did. And that was a problem. Claire told herself she wasn't thinking about Jackson. But that was a lie. Ever since the power outage, he had been in her head more often than she liked to admit. It wasn't just the rumors or the lingering awareness of him. It was the way he had acted that night. The easy way he had made himself comfortable in her space. The way his fingers had pressed into her skin, loosening the tension in her neck. The way he looked at her now like he knew something she didn't. It was infuriating. And now, she was standing in front of his cafe like an absolute idiot. Her shipment had been delayed. Again. And she was fresh out of vanilla syrup during the busiest time of the day. She had options. She could run to the supply store. She could change the menu for the afternoon. Or she could do the unthinkable. She could ask him for help. Claire clenched her fists, forcing herself to march through the doors of Bean Battle. The cafe was buzzing with customers, the rich scent of espresso and freshly baked pastries filling the air. Jackson stood behind the counter, laughing at something one of his baristas said. But when he spotted Claire, his smile turned downright predatory. "Monroe," he greeted smoothly, setting down a coffee cup. "What a surprise." Claire exhaled sharply. "Cut the act, Reynolds. You know why I'm here." His lips twitched. "Do I?" She crossed her arms. "You offered me vanilla syrup the other day. I need it. So here I am." He let out a low chuckle, leaning against the counter. "So, let me get this straight. You, Claire Monroe, walked into my cafe, in front of all these people, to ask me for help." She ground her teeth. "Yes." Jackson tapped a finger against his chin, drawing out the moment. "I could give you the syrup. But what's in it for me?" Claire threw her hands in the air. "Oh my God. You are impossible." He smirked. "I'm kidding." He nodded toward the back. "Wait here." She blinked as he disappeared into the storeroom, reappearing a minute later with a full bottle of vanilla syrup. "No catch?" she asked suspiciously. He shrugged. "Consider it an investment." "In what?" "In seeing how long it takes before you admit I'm not the worst person you've ever met." Claire grabbed the bottle, her fingers brushing his for the briefest second. Her stomach did that stupid flipping thing again. She yanked her hand back. "Don't hold your breath, Reynolds." But as she left, gripping the bottle tighter than necessary, she swore she could still feel the warmth of his touch lingering against her skin. The universe had a sick sense of humor, because the very next day, Claire and Jackson were thrown together again. It started with an email from the Chester Business Alliance. "Dear Ms. Monroe and Mr. Reynolds, we are thrilled to invite the top 2 cafes on Main Street to participate in this year's Coffee and Culture Festival. This prestigious event will allow local cafes to showcase their best drinks, reach a wider audience, and participate in a special barista competition. As part of the festival, we are requesting that both Mocha Bliss and Bean Battle collaborate to create a signature drink to represent Main Street. We look forward to your participation." Claire reread the email twice, then once more for good measure. They wanted her to what? "Absolutely not," she muttered, pacing behind the counter. "Everything okay?" Melissa, her part-timer, asked. "No," Claire said flatly. "Because the universe hates me." Melissa peered at her phone screen and burst out laughing. "Oh my God. You and Jackson? Working together? This is gold." Claire groaned, rubbing her temples. Then, as if summoned by sheer bad luck, Jackson walked through her door. He was holding his phone, the email clearly still open. His expression was a mix of amusement and something else, something almost too entertained. "Let me guess," he drawled. "You got the same email?" Claire glared at him. "This isn't funny." He grinned. "Oh, it's hilarious. I'm not working with you." He held up his hands. Not my idea, Monroe. But if you refuse, you're going to be the one who looks bad. She scowled because he was right. She couldn't back out of the festival. It was too big of an opportunity. And that meant one thing. She was going to have to work with Jackson Reynolds for an entire month.
Kill her now.
By the time they met for their first collaboration session, Claire was already regretting her life choices. They sat at her counter, notebooks open, trying to brainstorm a signature drink. So, Jackson said, tapping his pen, we could go for something seasonal. A spice latte, maybe? Claire wrinkled her nose. Too basic.
Wow.
Tell me how you really feel. She ignored him. What about a cold brew with infused flavors? He shrugged. Not bad. But it needs something unexpected. She thought for a second. What if we incorporate something floral? Like lavender or rose? Jackson's brows lifted. Floral. Don't look at me like that, she snapped. He smirked. I'm just impressed. Didn't think you'd go for something so delicate. Claire flushed. I can be delicate. His gaze dropped, just for a second, to her lips before flicking back up. Sure, Monroe. The air between them shifted. Claire swallowed, looking away. Let's just focus on the drink. Jackson leaned in slightly, his voice lower.
Right.
The drink. She could feel the warmth of him, just inches away. The tension was unbearable. And the worst part? She liked it. This was going to be a disaster. Claire regretted everything. She regretted agreeing to this ridiculous collaboration. She regretted letting Jackson into her cafe after hours to experiment with drink recipes. She especially regretted how aware she was of him, his presence, his scent, the way his fingers brushed hers far too often to be accidental. Here, Jackson said, sliding a cup toward her. Try this one. Claire took a hesitant sip. The cold brew was smooth, the lavender subtle yet distinct. She licked her lips, rolling the flavors on her tongue. Jackson watched her closely. She set the cup down. Not bad. He smirked. Not bad? Monroe, that's the best reaction I've gotten out of you all night. She ignored him, reaching for her notebook. But when she flipped the page, her pen rolled off the counter. Before she could grab it, Jackson reached down at the same time. Their fingers collided. Claire froze. The warmth of his skin sent a jolt up her arm, her breath catching. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Jackson did something dangerous. He didn't pull away. Instead, his thumb brushed lightly over her knuckles, the touch barely there yet impossible to ignore.
Claire's throat went dry.
She should move. She should break the contact, snatch her pen, and pretend this never happened. But she didn't. Instead, she looked up, meeting his eyes, dark, unreadable, intense. Careful, Monroe, he murmured, his voice lower than usual. You might start enjoying my company. She yanked her hand back, heart hammering. Don't flatter yourself, she said, grabbing her pen and turning back to her notebook. But her pulse told a different story. And the way Jackson was still looking at her? He knew it. Over the next few days, things only got worse. The festival was coming up fast, which meant more time spent together, more taste testing, more late nights trying to perfect their signature drink. And more moments where Jackson got way too close. Like today. Your espresso shots are too strong, Claire muttered, adjusting the milk ratio in their latest version of the drink. Jackson leaned in behind her, peering over her shoulder. My espresso shots are perfect. You just have weak taste buds. Excuse me? She turned to glare at him, only to realize just how close he was. He didn't step back. Go on, he teased. Tell me how wrong I am. Her breath hitched. She could feel the heat radiating from him, his scent, coffee, cedar, something else entirely him, filling the space between them. Her fingers clenched around the milk pitcher. But before she could finish, his hand brushed over hers. A spark shot through her. Jackson paused, his gaze flickering to where their skin touched. Then he slowly dragged his fingers away, like he was testing her reaction. She nearly shivered, but she wouldn't give him the satisfaction. Claire cleared her throat, stepping to the side. Focus, Reynolds. We have a festival to win. He grinned, but there was something sharper in his eyes now.
Right.
The festival. But the way he was looking at her? The festival was the last thing on his mind. And if Claire was honest with herself, it was the last thing on hers, too. The night before their final drink submission, they were back in Claire's cafe, tweaking the recipe one last time. Maybe less honey, she murmured, adjusting the mixture. Jackson took a sip from her cup, the one she had just been drinking from, before nodding.
Yeah.
It's close, but something's still off. Claire ignored the way her stomach flipped. Try this. She reached for the sugar container at the same time Jackson did. Their hands collided. Again. This time, neither of them pulled away. Claire inhaled sharply. Jackson exhaled slowly. His fingers curled slightly around hers, the tension between them thick enough to cut with a knife. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, I think, Jackson murmured, his voice impossibly soft, we might be past the point of pretending this isn't happening. Claire swallowed. Her pulse was racing. Her skin burned where he touched her. And, the worst part? She didn't want to pull away. But this was Jackson. Her rival. The person she was supposed to hate. She forced herself to step back, her breath shaky. We should finish this drink. Jackson's jaw ticked. But he nodded. Right, he said, his voice lower. The drink. But as they worked, as their fingers brushed again and again, as the tension between them thickened like steam, Claire knew. This wasn't just rivalry anymore. This was something much, much more dangerous. And she was completely, utterly screwed. The festival was just 2 days away. The drink was finalized. Everything was set. And yet, Claire was losing sleep over something else entirely. Jackson Reynolds. Every lingering touch, every stolen glance, it all built up like steam in a pressure cooker.
And tonight?
Tonight, it was about to explode. They were doing one last late-night test run at Bean Battle, making sure everything was perfect. The cafe was empty except for the two of them, the air thick with the scent of coffee and unspoken tension. Claire stood by the espresso machine, adjusting the milk froth, when Jackson came up behind her.
Close.
Too close. You're oversteaming it, he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. Claire's fingers twitched. I know what I'm doing, Reynolds. Do you? His voice was lower now, teasing, but there was something darker beneath it. She turned, intending to snap at him, only to realize just how close he was. Their faces were inches apart. His hands were braced on either side of her against the counter, effectively caging her in. She should step back. She should. But she didn't. Jackson's gaze flickered to her lips. Just for a second. Claire's breath hitched. Monroe, he murmured. It wasn't mocking. It wasn't taunting. It was a warning. Or maybe a plea. She didn't know who moved first. Maybe it was him. Maybe it was her. But the next second, their mouths crashed together and everything else ceased to exist. It was heat. Frustration. Weeks of built-up tension spilling over in a kiss so fierce it left her dizzy. Jackson's hands tangled in her hair, pulling her closer, deepening the kiss until she had no choice but to melt into him. Claire gripped his shirt, tugging him in like she needed him closer, like space between them was unacceptable. The espresso machine beeped. They ignored it. The taste of coffee lingered on his lips, the scent of him overwhelming her senses. Jackson's fingers slid along her waist, burning through the fabric of her shirt. When he finally broke away, his forehead rested against hers, both of them breathless. Tell me this was a mistake, he murmured. Claire opened her mouth, closed it, because she couldn't say it. Jackson exhaled, his grip tightening. Yeah, he whispered. That's what I thought. Another beat of silence. Then Claire did the only thing that made sense. She kissed him again. And this time she didn't stop. The next morning, Claire walked into mocha bliss feeling like she had just committed a crime. Because kissing Jackson Reynolds? That was dangerous. She had spent the night tangled up in something she wasn't sure how to handle, and now, standing behind her counter, she could still feel the ghost of his touch. She needed to get it together. This was a mistake, right? A stupid, reckless mistake. The bell over the door chimed. She didn't have to look up to know who it was. Jackson leaned against the counter, looking too smug for someone who had just turned her world upside down. "Morning, Monroe." She glared at him. "Don't." His grin widened. "Don't what?" "Act like you weren't the one who dragged me back for a second round." Claire's face burned. "We are not talking about this." "Oh, we definitely are." He leaned closer. "Unless you want me to remind you exactly how much you—" She slapped a napkin in front of him. "Order something or get out." Jackson chuckled, slow and deep.
All right.
"I'll behave. For now." Claire huffed, but as she turned away, she caught her reflection in the coffee machine. Flushed cheeks. Slightly swollen lips.
Oh, hell.
She was in so much trouble. The day of the festival arrived, and Claire had two problems. The entire town was watching them. She couldn't stop thinking about Jackson. They worked the booth side by side, pouring samples, answering questions, pretending like they weren't completely different from just a few days ago. And every time their hands brushed, every time their eyes met for just a second too long, Claire swore she could hear the static between them. Then came the moment of truth, the barista showdown. They had 5 minutes to make their signature drink. They moved in sync, perfectly timed, as if they had been working together for years. The judges sipped their drink, nodded, and then the announcement. The winner of this year's Coffee and Culture Festival is Mocha Bliss and Bean Battle's collaborative drink. The crowd erupted. Claire turned to Jackson, half expecting some cocky remark, but instead, he just looked at her, like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. "Guess we make a good team," he said, voice quieter than usual. Claire's heart flipped. "Don't get used to it," she teased. But when he reached for her hand, lacing their fingers together for just a second before letting go, she knew. This wasn't over. Not even close. 2 weeks later, nothing had changed. They still argued, still pushed each other's buttons, still acted like rivals in front of the world. But behind closed doors, Jackson leaned against her counter one night, watching her lock up. So, he mused, "Are we still pretending?" Claire rolled her eyes. "You're the worst." His smirk softened, just slightly. "And yet, here you are still letting me in."
She sighed.
Then, just to shut him up, she kissed him. And just like that, the game changed. For good.